So I'll start by giving a real high-level overview of the Overture Group, which many of you know, and then we'll also give you info on our perspective. So the Overture Group is an executive search and compensation consulting firm. The majority of our clients, when we say middle market, are 50 million in revenue to $1 billion in revenue. So that's a lot of our perspective. We also do addition for this. There's a ton of research. Joe's got a binder full of different reports from the big four accounting firms, the middle market accounting firms, large consulting firms. So a lot of the trends we're talking about we're specifically talking about that middle market from our perspective, but the research and what we see or hear from larger companies is similar. So that's a little bit about the Overture Group. I'm also going to spend a little bit of time before getting started, just to give you some clarity on our presentation, because the title, Evolution of CFO and Controller Roles, could be fairly broad, open to interpretation. So we are talking about how the controller and CFO roles have changed over the last couple of decades. We feel it's accelerated, so mostly the last 10 or so years, we're trying to tell you how those two roles have evolved. It's also worth noting, at the lower end of the middle market, a lot of companies don't have both a controller and CFO. They will have often either have a controller or a CFO, or a variety of other titles, Director of Finance, VP of Finance and Administration, and that one person will essentially do aspects of both these roles. Though that's totally true, it's not, this presentation is not on that. This presentation is on the trends of the controller and CFO roles at companies that have both a separate CFO and a controller. Yeah, and then also just like to add, as we're doing this, we want this to be interactive. We'll definitely have questions for members of the audience, but as we're talking, if questions come to you that are relevant, feel free, to raise your hand. And we want to make this as useful as we can to the people in this room. I also won't bore you too much. I hope everyone can read this fine print we have up there.
Can't yell out the bottom.
If we moved up, we could say
When we give you the slides, we really want you to spend a lot of time studying our plans. But I'll give you just a quick high-level overview on both of us. Joe is a CPA. He worked in public accounting at the beginning of his career. He's had the title of controller and divisional CFO, so it brings a unique perspective. And then about 10 years or so, as he turned to the dark side of recruiting, for about 10 years he spent with other firms, other search firms and consulting firms, before joining the Overture Group about 2 years ago. And then myself, I started my career working with Wells Fargo. After a couple of years, I moved into recruiting, where I worked for another firm doing just accounting and finance search. Then I joined the Overture Group about 7 years ago. So also, it's worth noting, CFO and controller roles are the most common positions that the Overture Group works on. Myself, Joe, and our fearless leader, John, are probably the three people at the firm that lead most of those searches. So gives you an overview on sort of, I guess, why we're able to tell you about the trends and things we see pertaining to those two positions. Want to quickly go over what we're trying to accomplish in this presentation, as well as add to, if there's other things as far as answering questions or things you will find of value, like I said, add them. But we want to go over what businesses right now are demanding in their finance function. I think that obviously drives a lot of this evolution and the changes in both positions. We'll then specifically talk about the evolution of the CFO position, and then the controller role and sort of how that CFO evolution has impacted and changed the controller role. We will go over skills, traits that make for both a good CFO and a controller. And then we'll talk about the current market for both the CFO and the controller.
Question,
Yep.
did I hear you say you're gonna make these slides available?
Yes, we'll get them, well, I'm gonna give a little plug too. For business cards, the fishbowl up front, if you put your business card in there, Vince does a great job of sending out everyone's contact information, but then also, I'll get the slides over to Vince and he could send out our presentation. And then you'll have my contact info and Joe's. If you have any particular questions, whatever it might be, feel free to reach out too.
Thanks.
Hey, Mike, are you also gonna give it to the video people? I mean, that's a little bit longer timeline, but could be included in the video?
Sure, I like that. Get an approval from John, he's nodding, so.
Everybody gets a copy.
Is that my Christmas present, John?
That's the Overture Group name. Don't look under your chair because we have no surprises under your chair.
No books to give away today.
All right, so we'll get started with talking about what companies are demanding from their finance function today.
And the first thing that I want to talk about is that things that businesses want from their finance department are growing by a day. And at the Overture Group, we try to list those tasks/processes in a handout that we call the finance and accounting responsibilities grid. These bullet points definitely are too numerous and too small to talk about, and it would probably take the whole hour to do so. But the one takeaway that I want you all to get is that this grid is broken down into 4 quadrants. The top 2 are communicator, facilitator, and analyst. The second one on the right is business strategic advisor. The lower left is accounting transactions, and the lower right is systems and compliance. What we've seen is that most, if not all, accounting and finance roles, the duties and responsibilities are usually a blend of several quadrants. Okay, it's not just one quadrant where a professional will work in. Another takeaway from this slide is that the top 2 are more strategic in nature. Those are duties that you would maybe see a CFO be more held responsible, especially in the traditional roles, and we'll talk about future like in a few minutes. The lower 2 are more day-to-day, tactical, historical, and taken on a lot by controllers as well. What we've been seeing, we'll talk about later as well, is that there's usually a shift, okay, with companies that are focusing more from tactical to strategic, and there's a lot of tasks that need to be done. So as we go towards the future in the evolution, CFOs and controllers are faced with the challenge with how can I get more for less? Okay, how do I leverage the resources that I have to be able to do as many of these effectively as possible? Well, there's traditionally 2 ways to do that. You can either increase human capital, which a lot of CFOs don't want to do, but it's going to erode their margin, or they're going to use some type of automation or IT to automate a lot of processes that are here on this graph. So, like I said, this is going to be participatory. So the first question that I pose to you, and I'm sure we have a lot of controllers and CFOs here, would be, what kind of processes have you automated in your career that has helped allow you to leverage your time to do more with less? Do I see any hands? Please.
Treasurer. Treasurer.
Tom?
Great, great.
A whole bunch of what I call the transaction factors, receivables, payables, fixed assets, and inventory, usually three match.
Those are both very good answers. Do we have any other?
Yeah.
Yes, Chair.
It's outside, it's down a different fork though, but what I did is I was able to hire somebody right out of college a couple of different times, and they were enthusiastic, they wanted to learn, and they had the right personality, and so I gave them a lot of different additional duties, and they kind of were like an assistant controller.
So that allows you
Human
to
capital was real important, but again, it's because of they weren't millennials back then. I don't know what they were called,
Well,
but that's one way.
Yeah.
that's also very important.
Sure.
Yes.
Yeah, somebody has to do this automation, it doesn't just
Right.
happen.
Yes, please.
you know?
I'd say new financial systems, upgrading, I mean, which
That may be
can
assistant
huge.
reporting or
Yeah,
stuff
so
like
the
that.
technology is the backbone of that automation, right? Why, right?
Yes.
I did leave out a couple on the other end of the transaction scale, FP&A systems, data visualization of dashboards at the other side, plus underlying warehouse.
Yeah.
T&E systems,
Does anyone-
ERP,
Yes.
ERP has been a big,
Yep.
great.
Automated reconciliation.
Yes, yes. Well, I think these are all great answers. And McKinsey and Company, they did a study recently where they surveyed over 100 CFOs and controllers.
Yep.
And a lot of these items that you are talking about are here on the list. One thing that we found is that 75% of CFOs and controllers surveyed actually were able to they were able to fully automate 3 of those items, and all 3 happen to be mentioned. Those are general accounting operations, whether it's account reconciliation work, doing repeating and recurring journal entries, closing the financial statement, cash disbursements, so anything pertaining to like AP, as well as all revenue management, billing, cash collections.
Yep.
Something else that we're going to see is that as we go further down, those that were not as fully automated were more strategic in nature. So when we reflect back to the accounting responsibilities grid, those were the 2 items that are more on top. We see that companies are those items that were more tactical. Those are the easiest to automate, which allows the controller and the CFO to leverage their time, free it up to focus more on driving the business and focusing more on strategic things. Mike?
And I'm excited, like I said, a lot of our research is, like, the big companies and the big consulting firms, they do great research and have good writing. And a lot of what you said is totally echoed by McKinsey. So it's in the middle market and the larger companies. And I know you can't read it, but he went through those top 3. So those are the ones that I feel like really, when we ask for examples, you talked about the areas for opportunity to automate in the same areas they did. And then, I like that. John, you have a question?
And I can't see online, but is there certain,
So-
in that,
yeah, so
that
this
ranking,
graph-
business analytics?
So this graph, as you can, the darkest color, the darkest blue, is what they believe, the likelihood of automating something completely. And then it goes highly, somewhat difficult to do as you move to less shades of dark blue. And those top ones are what Joe said, your general accounting, processes and operations, cash disbursement, revenue management. Some of the harder things to like fully automate, though you can partially do it, is something like the audit. I'm assuming things that you have to have a relationship with, communicate person to person. There's just less you can't fully automate that.
And they actually do bring up treasury as a function that was fully automated. Only about 40% said that they were able to like either fully or highly automate that. So for you to be able to do that, you're probably a little bit ahead of the curve, which is nice to see. Yes.
I noticed that FP&A is pretty low on the fully, and there's a lot of new systems in place where you can pretty well program budgets.
Mhm.
You have cloud-based software that actually do that, and everybody in the organization has access to it. And then from there, then you go to the KPIs, and then you can spend more time delving into not just the ratios, but the why.
Yeah. So that, I think, you said the why, right? So he asked about FP&A, and he said he noticed it's low on the automation scale. So I would say, I think it echoes what you're saying, though. So the fully automated is only 11%, which is one of the lowest of the things pulled. But for highly and somewhat automatable, it's one of the largest. It's 45% and 34% respectively. So probably what you said, that why is hard to answer. It probably takes
That's where you need to
more,
spend more-
yeah. So you
spend your focus on, not just doing the
Yeah.
ratio, but coming up with what's driving.
Yep. So if you can somewhat automate the legwork and you can focus on that, that's extremely valuable to an organization and not done by the majority of companies. Like it really is. I mean, we see that all the time sitting in front of either a CFO, a president, CEO, when they're hiring for the leadership of their accounting team. And actually, as I say that, it's a decent transition. Why some of this evolution is occurring. So the root of the ability to make this, change these roles and save people time is automation and technology. But, you know, one of the driving forces, if you will, and people that are actually doing it are the private equity firms, which are a bigger and bigger part of the middle market. And when we sit down with private equity firms and we look at a portfolio company that they've recently acquired, and this is one of the things I'd say is pretty universal with different private equity, across, you know, multiple private equity firms. When they buy a company, the accounting and finance team, you know, they evaluate it. They're not looking to necessarily change leadership, though it often happens. But what I'd say is consistent is they'll look at it. Their head count in accounting and finance will go down, but their total payroll will go up. So it's good, like, they upgrade the positions and they value the positions. Because Joe pointed out, private equity firms are not, when we were talking about this, they're not in the business of losing money. They're not just increasing payroll costs, you know, for the sake of increasing payroll costs, but they know the value of a well-ran financial, accounting and finance team, and they ask more of both the CFO.
They are expecting more, you know, they are expecting more from their CFOs and controllers, and they're not gonna be increasing their labor 2 times unless of course they can get 5, 6, 7 times return on that dollar. Okay, the next thing that we would like to talk about is how the roles of both the CFO and the controller has evolved, you know, from the present and future, and you can't talk about evolvement unless you know where you used to be. So Mike's going to talk a little bit about that as it pertains to the CFO role.
And I will try to talk about the traditional CFO, but it's very difficult when we talk about either of these positions, because this evolution, it's not like it happens fast, right? And when I look at the traditional CFO roles of the past, if you summarize it, it's a lot of, there's definitely relationship management. You're managing the relationship with your bank, your auditor. You're spending a lot of time with financial reporting, communicating those reports, and you're managing the accounting and finance team. Some of those things, they're definitely not gone, and they probably won't be gone entirely. But you know, if you think about the traditional role, I think that's the majority of the person's time is accounting and finance focused, and owning and leading that accounting and finance function. Well, now there's going to be parts of that are always your responsibility. I'm sure as many of you could attest, right? Is any financial leader completely done with all that on the board? So you'll have to do it. I think the key is through automation and through empowering the people below you, possibly the controller. We see a lot of companies that didn't have a leader in FP&A 10 years ago do now. So the whole department is changing. So the more you could have either automated or really owned and led by your controller or your other financial leaders, the better it is for the CFO and them being able to focus on other things that are value added to the organization. So this graph, actually before, and I'm taking it, but what other areas for the people in the room, you know, so I'll give you the graph first. This polled CFOs and they asked them where they spent the most time, most of their time, the last 12 months. And 45% of them said traditional finance. So similar to the traditional CFO, a lot of time is being spent there still. What is sort of the future in this evolving role, 41% of them spent the majority of their time in non-finance related functions and focus. So that could be anything from, you know, just organizational strategic leadership, transforming the organization, performance management. We also see, especially in the middle market, CFOs often are responsible for other functions. HR and IT, namely, will often report into the CFO. But what do you see? I mean, are there other areas that you're spending the majority of your time outside of accounting, or even if it's not the majority, just that are taking, you know, a big portion of your time?
Aside from the bar and M&A,
Okay.
activities, strategic thought outside of the the internal focus of capital finance.
Yep, and I think that is, it's a good concrete example because when you have a CFO, they'd always be involved in M&A in the past, right? But I think it's a bigger just business focus in general, businesses across the board. Maybe some of that's private equity driven as well. But you want the CFO not only to be able to do due diligence and, you know, tell you how this works, you want them to like actively seek out either good business opportunities, know where to look, and know what makes sense as far as a strategic acquisition. Those answers, we'll talk more about it in terms of traits, those are not, they're not clear-cut black and white answers, right? They take a lot of critical thinking and just sort of being comfortable in the gray. I think it's a good example of M&A acquisitions. Anything else in particular?
I think it's using the data that's available with ERP systems and using analytics with that and partnering with the different leaders of the businesses. And you can find a lot of opportunities that way.
100%. I think on there, big data and analytics is listed. I'm surprised it's not higher. I know it's been around forever. I feel like we've heard about big data longer than, you know, we're well past the era of big data. We're into it, but now the technology to utilize and process that data, I feel like has caught up to having just the raw amounts of data. So there's a ton of value there, and trying to figure out how to, you know, best use that information is Vince?
Facility management?
Facility management is definitely a big thing. It's something, so that's an operational issue, right? So, and that's a lot of where I think some of these areas are focusing on. It's outside of finance, right? So the CFO is really asked to be a business leader, a general business leader outside of finance. Tom?
Yeah, I spend way too much time on compliance, jurisdictional compliance, tax, those types of things.
That's great that you actually mentioned that, because that's something we're going to talk about in a future slide, that there's been a shift from that being a traditional CFO role to maybe more of a controller focus lately. And then as we get to that, we start talking about present and future, you're going to see that there's definitely a greater emphasis put in those areas.
But you can't avoid some of it too.
Exactly.
And we mentioned, or I wanted to mention this, but all of this in terms of trends, these are data points and trend observations or research on trends. All the roles that you're in currently, have been in recently, those are the individual data points, and all of them are blended, where you're doing, you know, like I said, you haven't eliminated everything from a traditional CFO role or a traditional controller role. You're doing blends of both these, and when you look at that accounting finance responsibility grid, you're wearing multiple hats, so there's no wrong answers. John?
You know, one of the biggest gripes or complaints that we get from business owners, CEOs, is that their CFO is not spending enough time in the business and operations, getting out. We talk about getting out in the different departments, right? Understanding what's going on with the business. Because CFOs are supposed to be futuristic and growth driven, right? They need to be growth minded. And you can't be growth minded unless you know what's going on in the operation. So that's one of the biggest gripes that we see from our owners and CEOs when they hire a CFO. That's one of the critical skills that they want. They want to know, and they want peace of mind, that their CFO is not only the right hand, but they're out in the business, understanding where we are and where we want to go. And you can't do that without getting in the operations. You can't do it sitting in your office, crunching numbers, right?
Oh, yeah.
That's the biggest gripe.
Being focused in areas where you could add value outside of accounting finance is essential.
Let me just make a comment on that. So there's a lot of people in transition in this room. When I was in transition, before I got my job with PLS, I got tipped off, which was great, by the person that was working on the search, that you should go visit. So we have 240 check cashing stores in 12 states. So they said you should visit a few of the stores so that when you come to the interview, you've actually been in a store. You know, the last guy did that, and they really liked it. So that's right on point. So you don't do that. You go into the interview cold, and they, you know, if obviously retail, it's easier, but it's a manufacturing business, you know, do some research on their operations or similar operations. So when you come to it, you're not just the guy who does the audit and deals with the bank, but you actually understand some of the manufacturing challenges or whatever it is in the company that you're interviewing for.
We, you know, and I'll just play off that, we were doing a CFO search, and this candidate that we were working with went above and beyond in the interview process. They knew that the company was gonna be at a trade show. The person actually went to the trade show and learned as much as he could about the new products and the innovation in the organization, and was able to use that information in the interview. And he did get the job because I think he impressed the hiring manager so much that he went above and beyond.
And on the flip side, not doing those, not showing interest will kill you. I have a controller search right now, and the CFO who's hiring the controller really liked the person, the candidate, and the candidate's last interviews with the CEO, who pretty much invented the service that this business provides. And it's well thought of. They're a market leader in the business, and the candidate had just no good questions for like, hey, I have the creator of this entire business, like let me pick his brain. And the CEO didn't care at all that this guy was a good controller, because that's not what he was judging. But he just like gave him the thumbs down because he wasn't impressed. He sort of wants somebody who's interested in his business. That's his baby, you know what I mean? So it definitely matters for getting the next job.
And you don't want to give the perception that finance is purely working out of the ivory tower. You've got to be out in operations. You've got to be that trusted business partner. You've got to be seen. You've got to be heard. You've got to be able to roll those sleeves up. And we see that a lot in middle market. You want people who can get down and dirty, roll the sleeves up.
So I know I appreciate all that. That's good. I guess I could help with to piggyback off all the things we've been saying. Today's CFO and what we think it'll be more and more in the future is you have to be in active leadership. Your role is active leadership for the entire business, as we said. And it's not, so mind you, that means it's not just accounting focus, how it pertains to the other businesses. It says evaluate current approaches to overcoming external pressures and come up with new solutions. So it's not like, I don't want to make it seem like CFOs weren't doing these things 20 years ago or longer, right? They were, but I think there's just more of your focus needs to be there, and especially the new solutions part. Identifying problems, I think, has always been a function of finance, but now they want creative solutions. You can't be creative when it comes to financial reporting, but when it comes to coming up with business solutions.
If you don't want to go to jail.
Finding new investment opportunities definitely mirrors the M&A that you mentioned. So maybe it's strategic acquisitions, maybe it's entering a brand new market, expanding internationally, things like that. And then those bottom two roles definitely have the focus on data. And it's also you are still a finance leader, and you're going to be asked, so you should be involved in making sure that the budget that your controller or your FP&A leader is putting together, challenging it to make sure it's effective and actually, impactful to the business. All right. So with that being said, this evolution in the CFO role has definitely impacted the controller position as well.
As we talk about the role of the controller, like in the past, we'll see that a lot of these tasks are routine, they're repetitive, they're cyclical. They're basically items that are in the lower left quadrant of that finance and accounting responsibilities grid. A lot of them are transaction-based, right? The controller was ultimately responsible for things like AP and billing and collections, payroll, things like that. Month end close, once again, cyclical. Assisting in the budget and forecasting, once again, cyclical. Okay, doing budget and variance analysis. Those are done monthly, at least monthly. Okay. Staff development pertains to human interaction, of course. Staff development and point of contact with external auditors and tax teams. The staff development piece is more of a hands-on, showing people how to do things. It's not the way that we used to develop staff in the past is not the same way that you can do it now or do it in the future. You've got to evolve to find more creative ways, take it more of a coaching approach, which I'll talk about next. But staff development was definitely something that was very important back then. Managing daily cash flows. Back then, maybe only from the perspective of sources and uses. You're now looking at things like interest rate, risk. You're not looking in terms of long term. That was maybe handled more by the CFO as opposed to the controller back in the day. These are just a few of the things. I'm kind of curious when you think back to your controller days in the past, like I have. Are there any other items that maybe could also apply? And do you feel that a lot of those are maybe transactional as opposed to being strategic in the past?
Maybe things that have been automated or items that have changed, and what your controller is now expected to do.
Right. Because like automation has changed so much, and it gets down to the evolution, things that we used to do that were repetitive, that were manual. Automation has replaced a lot of it and has allowed us to do our job much more effectively and efficiently. I know that I could basically check the box on all of those, and I'm sure there's several that I've left off. But if anybody else would like to add, now's a good time. If not,
Maybe talk about the president.
oh yeah, sure, yeah, sure. The present day of controller, that role has definitely evolved from what it was in the past. It's more in terms of soft skills, process improvement, and being a financial expert. If I were to categorize these into three overall buckets, the soft skills are leader. A controller now has to be more of a leader than ever before. That duty just doesn't fall on the hands of the CFO anymore. This person has to be a coach, a teacher, and a mentor, not just a shower of how to do things and the reason why we're doing them. This person has to be a good recruiter and play a more active role in identifying, recruiting, and retaining top talent. That role just doesn't fall on HR anymore. And as you build organizations, like I said earlier, there's two ways that companies are doing more with less. A lot of it is through automation, absolutely. But the other piece, to Jerry's point, was through human capital. So that how can we get the most out of our human capital? Well, you want to make sure that people are trained properly. You want to be able to make sure you can identify top talent, because if you can't do that, then you're really behind the eight ball. And process improvements, streamlining processes in today's world always has always been important. Improving the reporting, whether it's through balanced scorecards, KPIs, being able to measure it timely and accurately, and disseminating that information out to the field is very, very important to today's controller. As far as specialization goes, with the ever-evolving complexities of rules and regulations, there's always new GAAP pronouncements that are coming out, whether it's revenue recognition, which is a little bit old now, but lease accounting and things like that. Your controller has seen, if you don't have a manager of technical accounting, because those are usually the larger Fortune 500 companies, those do usually fall on the responsibility of the controller to be the technical expert. And then, of course, financial operations and controls are always going to be a very important part now as well as in the future.
And I know I said something similar to this for the CFO, but it holds true. If you read those bullet points, they're not, you say, hey, well, that was happening a while ago, right? It's not like this is today all of a sudden process improvement's really important, and it wasn't important 15 years ago. It was always important. But it's the speed in which it's done and how it's done that's changed. So like with technical accounting research, you could use Google, you know what I mean? It's just a different process. You could Google your technical research, where you could get an answer that might have taken 2 days in 2 minutes. So it's taken you a lot less time. From the working with systems, which is extremely important. Companies, a lot of times, they'll still emphasize, we want somebody with X, Y, and Z system because that's what we're using. When you could go on Google or you could go on YouTube, plug in your system and the process you're trying to accomplish in the system, and they will give you a video tutorial that will show you exactly how to do it. So it's just those things should take less time, take less resources in terms of hard cash, and you got to be an expert in those things, and then use them to focus on more value-added pieces of the business. John?
Yeah, Mike, you know, one of the, a very critical skill, when you're getting on automation, it's being technically savvy. Our clients, when they're looking to hire a controller, they want to know they're hiring somebody that could be that super user who will get into the system, understand how the data flows from the system, become that expert. Also taking their systems, what they currently have, and bringing it to another level in terms of the enhancements, but also being able to take this current system and turn on different modules, turn on different features of it, so you're bringing data to life for the business, so people in leadership positions can make decisions from that. So I really hit hard in today's, controllers today have to be extremely system savvy and know how to work their way around the computer system.
Because the parts that you've already automated that take you less time, now your job is to figure out what else can this system do.
Yes.
And I think that's a big part of the controller role. Yep.
I think it's, when we talk about, or you're talking about systems automation now, I think it's beyond just normal ERP or
Yes.
accounting, because
Yep.
like Salesforce, like
Yes.
controller or something, it's expected to integrate with all the other departments, and you lose some control because things get automated for approvals and stuff. So they have to be involved and know what they're giving up and work with other software and other things outside of traditional accounting.
Completely true, and when we talk to companies, there's so many that aren't doing that, and it seems like, well, why? Like, what's going on? There's so many systems that companies have decided to buy, and then maybe they just didn't get implemented properly, but they're not talking to each other, and that's just not how it should be. You could bring, as a controller, you could bring a ton of value to the company to get them to do those things. And it's not just your ERP, like you said, it's other systems. And there's really good, inexpensive tools out there that are great for, I guess, working alongside your ERP and report writing and business intelligence and different data. We work with Salesforce, whatever it is, there's all this data from different systems. Controller's got to be a master of getting those to work together.
And that's a difference today of traditional controller and what we will call a value-added controller. How do I bring value? And that's a great way to bring value to the organization.
Yes.
I think really the discussion, when you shift to multiple systems and different functions of the business, that's really where your controls feature comes in, because you're designing control.
Absolutely.
You're not operating, you are not the signer necessarily, but you have to decide what controls are required in order to enter a transaction. What review techniques should follow in order to make sure that it's not being egregiously abused.
Yeah, I love my CPA.
I
think
you're spot on.
you have to have the technical knowledge, because like an IT person could get these systems all work together, and it's ease of use, but there's no financial
But
control.
someone's got to be the champion.
Yeah.
Okay? And in some organizations, you find the champion of those IT initiatives sometimes fall on the CFO, or it gets handed down to the controller. And the controller has to be very adept, has to be very tech savvy too.
Don't
John's
have to be
point.
IT.
Right.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, yes.
Well, do you see more risk management coming into play in the CFO role? It's like, when I look at it, it's like you have data privacy, new regulations.
I love these
on
comments.
that.
And yes,
Yeah.
and
Vendor risk management, I mean, the interplay,
Yes.
And you had mentioned that, the
Yes.
interplay between different vended systems. And it's like, when one upgrades, can the other one handle that upgrade? And it's like managing all of that.
100%, because one, there's a ton of benefits to, like, there's good just empirical data on companies that have switched to a cloud-based system and them sort of leading the way in improving all the things we talked about. But then the downside, and I think the fear is like, what about the risk management? Now all this information is in the cloud, which is scary. People could hack your information no matter where it is. Cloud, in a data warehouse in your house. I mean, it's not, but being aware of how do I best protect our company against that is a big strategic thought, and it's on that list, I think, from that survey of CFOs. So.
And it's something that we're actually going to address in a future slide here coming up. That risk management is very important, not only in present day, but in the future controller/CFO worlds.
So risk management, I think was always a part of the CFO role. So that's what I mean, like the nuance of how has it changed is unique. So like the way they're focused on it is different, and they probably weren't worried about, you know, their information being hacked 20 years ago. But it's also somebody who, if you go into that CFO role, you have to be very comfortable navigating that risk. Because I think it's a lot of CFOs, a lot of accounting and finance professionals in general, they're risk averse. They like answers that are black and white. And as a CFO, you gotta get outside of that. You gotta get outside your comfort zone, or be comfortable in that zone. And that's a big part of today's CFO.
Yes.
Yeah, going back to what you were saying about being more operationally oriented CFOs, this plays out really well when you're trying to integrate all these systems, because the head of sales owns Salesforce, and so you're coming in trying to put rules in place about, you know, when they're gonna put their projections in, what stage things are gonna be considered, and how that's gonna relate to your revenue stream. You have to have a great relationship with that head of sales to tell him that he has to change his system so that your controls will work for him.
And that's huge in terms of collaboration. That's something that we're gonna be talking about as far as the role of the CFO, being able to work across all departments, to work with the head of sales, to go work with the head of IT, to go work with the head of HR, to work with the head of operations, to be able to make sure that they're getting what they need, that you do it in a timely, do it in a very safe way as well. And as far as the like integration piece, that's more that we see that the controller is being, has been playing a very
Both
active role.
roles are totally involved in that. And I'm gonna call on you when we get to that slide, because it's confusing when it's like, well, both these roles are totally involved in things like that, but in similar but distinctly different ways, it gets confusing. So I'll definitely utilize the audience for that one.
You know, I was just wondering, and maybe it's on another slide, but what are you seeing in terms of pressure for the controller, the CFO, to become more involved in professional organizations? This is not a shameless plug for FEI, but, you know, joining FEI, joining Illinois CPA Society, becoming involved, and then to your point, you're getting to know other people that are having maybe similar problems, or that know, oh, there's a great FP&A director that's just looking for a job, you're asking for somebody. I mean, I don't see that on there, maybe that's on another particular
It's not on the slide,
slide.
but it's a good question.
I think it's good. John, did you want to address that one?
Oh, I do.
John squared around.
I think that is extremely important. When we do a search for a client, we write an onboarding plan. And part of our onboarding plan is, there's a section in there, it's called external relationships. Because in a lot of organizations, you have very limited resources and knowledge inside in your space, accounting and finance. We highly recommend that new controller, that new CFO, they're out of the office, they're coming to organizations, associations that are related to their field, because now they're bringing best practices, new ideas into the organization, innovation, right? How other people are doing things, what's important to other companies. Now, we didn't think about this. We recommend to our clients that your controllers and CFOs are active because of that. But also, too, you get back to your slide. In this market, it's not going to get any better. You need to stay ahead of the curve. The more people you meet, you never know when they can be an addition to your team, right?
Yeah.
I think that's very important as well. So you need to get out of the office. You need to spend a certain percentage of your, I'd say, a certain percentage of your month. I'm gonna go to 2-3 meetings a month. Now, it may not be between the hours of 9 and 5, but in order for you to stay up and abreast of what's going on, you need to be active and out of the office. So, sorry.
So
but we're very, we talk to our clients all day long. You gotta get them out, because if not, there's no new ideas and fresh ideas coming in.
It's extremely important. It's valuable to the company and very valuable to individuals in their career. Shamelessly plug, but you guys are at FEI, you know that, and I do think FEI puts on good, relevant, continuing education topics. But if you think, we've talked so much about automation without trying, this is not an automation presentation, there's countless automation presentations that if you're, wherever you're at in your career, CFO, controller, you know, some other leadership or future leader at their company, it'd be valuable to go to that CE. So companies know it's valuable. They might not be thinking, oh, I want my, whatever it is, my controller, my director of accounting, my whatever that position is, out and about. But if they understand it, if you just say, hey, like you know, there's so much out there, we're trying to accomplish these key objectives. You know, I found some outside resources that are relatively affordable. You know, I want to be a part of this, and I think it will help me accomplish what we need to for the company. I think you should be doing that. If your company's not encouraging it, which they might not, they won't discourage it if they understand why.
As we talk about the controller role in the future, I think a lot of you touched upon some very important points that are up there. Okay, so it's great that we're all thinking on the same page. You're probably already acting as such, you know. But the controller now is faced with the challenge of not just being a dissemination of information. That person has to be a trusted business partner, and that perception has to be very prevalent throughout the organization. You have to get out and about. You've got to talk to all the key stakeholders. You've got to let them know that you are very active and you're a very strong in problem solving. A lot of times that can be coincided with the integration of business processes and reporting. Okay, it's not just through acquisition when you're trying to integrate an acquired company with an existing one, but it's integrating processes together, whether it's sales, HR, or finance, to be able to get them all to be fully integrated, to be able to save on both labor and labor dollars as well as time. The controller, of course, is going to use technology to the best of their ability to be able to do things like that. Doing work like assisting the CFO in like M&A work, roles that used to be considered to be CFO focused, you know, that CFOs are now pushing a lot of that work down to controllers to be able to assist them. We work with companies a lot. It's not only the CFO that goes out and does the due diligence, you know, but also the controller will go with him or her, you know, to be able to be an extra set of eyes and ears to be able to evaluate an opportunity. Financial and operational controls, we talked about how that was important currently. That's always going to be important as regulations are constantly changing and businesses are becoming more complex. And things that a controller also has to look at is not only a CFO as far as growth for the future, but they've got to be looking at opportunities as well. And whether those are in emerging markets or like international waters, so to speak, they just can't focus about what's going on at home. A lot of time a CFO will maybe identify opportunities, but the controller also, like in terms of a CFO being the conscience for a CEO, a controller a lot of times is the conscience for the CFO as well, and then they're doing a lot of work as such. And one thing that I was, Mike, please go ahead.
I want to jump in. I think it's a good time to jump in. It's been 45 minutes show too, and I be conscious of time, so we try to get through as much as we can, as I wasted in the story. But to oversimplify the changes in the CFO and controller role, if you think about the CFO role, it's become more like a CEO role. And the controller role, in turn, has picked up a lot of those things and become more like the CFO role of the past. It's an oversimplification, but I think it really holds true.
Yeah, and as we talk about also about the roles in the future, I think that one, and maybe my perspective is a little bit jaded being in the industry that I'm in, but hiring and developing skilled accounting and finance talent is going to continue to be very important in the future. A question that I have posed for you is that these are only 7 or 8 bullet points that we've been able to identify. We know that there are more. I'm curious what you in the group feel is probably the most critical role of a controller in the future.
It's tough. It's open. There's no wrong answer in that.
There is no right or wrong answer. You know, I mean, there are so many things. Yes, ma'am.
My guess is it's that top one where we do a business partner, which means you need to get outside your comfort zone of the debits and credits and in the black and white, and start to understand the gray area.
I think a good argument could be made basically for like any point that's up there, and probably some points that are not up there. Yes, please.
I think your business partner is fairly critical operationally speaking. Compliance is never going to go away exactly, but we need a lot more focus at the controller level, I think, and the CFO on cybersecurity and data management issues.
That's a great point. That's a great point.
Try to be a little attempt, but I think that there's a good example that I could call on as far as how the roles have changed and impacted businesses. So I have a client, and it's, I won't use their name, but it's a well-known manufacturer, over 100 years old, so it's a fourth generation, privately held family business. And they're about 500 million in revenue, real strong presence in the US. And they hired a new CFO who we knew, he brought us on, we were doing like a finance director search that worked with and supported the corporate controller. So I had a meeting with the corporate controller, actually strangely, I think it was at Carlucci's a few years ago. So I met with him, and he had been with the company over 30 years. So in meeting with him, I could tell he was used to a traditional CFO. He had worked successfully as a controller probably for the last 2 CFOs, who by what they were asked to do from the ownership of the company were successful CFOs. But when talking to him, I don't know if he had the complete buy-in in this new position, and the new CFO was untested. So he said, yeah, you know, he's gone, this is the 3rd CFO he'd worked for. And he's like, I worked with other CFOs in the past, and they always tell me, hey, like, I want you to really own this kind of accounting and finance and blah, blah, blah. He goes, but, you know, they always keep their hands, they want things done a certain way. And I knew the CFO, so I was like, yeah, I think I really, like, you know, he was, the CFO was brought on to help them expand internationally and acquire strategic companies, companies that would help them with their R&D and their own technology. So that's a pretty strategic initiative. So anyways, we do the search, and I'm meeting with the guy probably 18 months later, this corporate controller, and I could tell night and day when I meet with him that the new CFO was completely different. And he sort of said that, he goes, yeah, I'm pretty much doing everything my previous CFO did. And the CFO, he trusts me to do all of it. He's gone. He's out of the country half the time. He's in other areas of the country, you know, acquiring companies. So it's just it's a real clear-cut example of, you know, when your business demands it and you change sort of the type of CFO, a controller or somebody you have already can be a great option and successfully run with it like he did. But either way, you got to be ready to sort of take on, you keep growing as a controller, and then, you know, both those people working together had a great impact on the business.
I think in the interest of time, we just briefly want to touch upon some of the personality traits that we see are going to be important to the CFO and controller going forward, as well as some key major focuses and some delineations between both roles.
Yeah, I would say I'll do quite a minute on this. So the CFO personality traits, the key is think whole company, big picture, influencers on there, so you have to be able to impact the strategic direction of the business. And yeah, sake of time, I think that's what I'll summarize it with.
As far as the controllers go, as we've talked about, he or she needs to be a team leader, or a team builder, excuse me. They need to be a leader not only in their own department, but be able to show how that value transcends across the organization. They need to be multifaceted, not just an expert in one area, although there needs to be technical expertise in certain areas, but they need to be highly proficient in many, and that perception has to be seen throughout the organization. It goes without saying, but I have to mention that they have to be trustworthy when numbers are coming out and when departments are having challenges. They have to be relied upon. They have to be, controls have to be trusted that the numbers are right and that they're going to work with departments that are having issues to be able to solve them. And that is only not looking at it from a financial perspective. Controllers need to be, I like to use the phrase, humbly confident and not arrogant, okay? Everybody likes a confident finance professional, you know, but they have to do it in a very tactful manner. And the last thing that I want to talk about is intellectual curiosity. And what we like to say about that is that it is controllers who are never satisfied. They're always trying to learn more. They're also trying to push the envelope, trying to find different ways of doing things, and not just just not relegating to the status quo. Those are just some of the things that I would like to mention.
Are there questions and things we want to get to where I mean,
Yeah.
we've sort of accomplished most of our key objectives. We didn't talk about the market, which I'd say the controller and CFO market has been great as of recent. And though there's maybe some hiccups in different financial markets as of late, and maybe the economy will slow down, long-term, the demographics look great for.
There's always data points that you could point to that are going to show that the glass is half empty, half full, okay? And they're talking about the short-term yield curve yesterday came out, and I mean, what does that mean for us in the future? I mean, that's, I think, a little bit of a pessimistic way to look at it. Just recently, we were at a middle market summit put on by RSM. They had their economists there, and what they were talking about is that they're looking to a strong 2019. 2020 is still going to be strong, maybe not quite as strong as 2019. And then we'll see what's going to happen after that. And of course, what's going to happen in 2020. You know, you're going to have the geopolitical climate that is going to rear its ugly head, and we don't know. There's going to be some uncertainty. But at least for in the near future, things are very positive. And we say that also in the Chicagoland area. We see positive growth in manufacturing distribution. We see it in service. We see it in FinServ companies. So there is a positive outlook out there right now.
So, do you want to go to one of those things? Maybe I was thinking, because it was brought up, so.
Yeah, let's do strategy.
So these, I'm going to do organizational collaboration because it was talked about by somebody in the audience. So the point of this slide is to take something that's important to both the CFO and controller. So I call it organizational collaboration, meaning that both the controller and CFO have to be involved with pretty much everybody in the business or departments outside of the business. And it was echoed in a number of comments from the audience. So what's the difference, right, between your controller and your CFO if they're both having to be collaborative with the organization? So I'd say the controller is going to be working with other departments. They're going to be gathering data, and then making, with that data being useful, they're creating a good flow of that data to other departments, back and forth to where it's needed to be. So if it's your sales and your operations people, if it's your marketing and your sales team, which should be communicating but aren't helping, there's a lot of different, you need to be the facilitator of that good flow of data. And on the flip side, that CFO sort of got to trust the controller and other people in the finance department to be doing that, to be facilitating that data transfer. But then they have to use it to direct the strategic direction of the business, hold those business leaders accountable, and really impact what's being done with that business, or what's being done with that data for the business. Does that make sense? And is there any other questions too? I know we're running out of time. I just want to open it up to any questions about, I guess, any of the things that we've covered, or just CFOs, controllers, the market, whatever it might be.
Yes, please.
Just from organizational collaboration, particularly as you get a little bit of size, nobody knows everything. Even if we think we do, we could be. So one of the things that you can get between your controller and your CFO is buttressing the other person's lesser experience areas.
Yep.
Which can be very valuable because you're going to need the skills of both to be a business partner, for finance to be an effective business partner for the organization.
That's a great point.
They need a complementation.
And I like to try to draw the analogy when we talk organizational collaboration to that of an architect versus a general contractor. Okay, the architect's going to draw the plan. He or she's going to have the blueprints. Here's what you need to do to go finish the house. They ensure a lot of responsibilities to the general contractor who's gonna work with the plumbers, the electricians, the painters, and all that stuff. Well, the
You
work
also
starts,
look at the plan and say, this doesn't work.
and that's what happens. So then, like, what happens? You know, you've got change orders, right? You got change orders, so then you go back to the architect, or you go back to the CFO and say, hey, the issue that we thought that was gonna work isn't gonna work. Well, who's gonna make that call? It's gonna be the architect that's gonna revise the plans, or it's gonna be the CFO collaborating with other key business leaders to be able to come up with a new plan. And then the controller, though, at the end of the day, is gonna be helping to like integrate that, integrate that plan.
Both roles are extremely important, have to challenge one another, work well together, et cetera. Judd?
Yeah, I think the communication skills cannot be overestimated in terms of effective listening, curiosity, asking good questions, and just listening.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of information out there. When you're
100%.
interacting, you can talk to anybody in the organization and get something from any one of those conversations.
100%. One more question? One more, Mark?
Yeah, you touched on it a little bit, but some of it is what the culture of the company is from a leadership standpoint. I worked for a company that was sales driven, and everybody sort of was driven by things. We merged with the company, merger of equals, which doesn't really exist, but and that was a company that had gone through bankruptcy, and then all of a sudden it was finance driven, and they said it was run by the bean counters. And as an accountant, you think, oh wow, this is a great position to be in. It was a terrible position to be in terms of trying to work with them. So understanding where the focus of the leadership is very critical in determining where that is.
Yeah, we hope, that's a good example. We hope that this data and what we're telling you about the trends helps you in your career identify where you want to be. Whether it's, I think often too, it's this whole I have to be a CFO. And I think the controller role is extremely valuable. If you go to the right organization, that's complex enough, it's valuable to them enough where it pays really well, right? At a bigger company, the controller is going to make more than a small company CFO. It just is what it is. So it's not like this whole this is better or worse. I think just knowing where you personally feel comfortable in terms of role, and then spotting the organization and their culture and what they're demanding from their finance team should help you in your own career.
We really appreciate the interaction. I mean, both Mike and I talked about this earlier, that we didn't want to come up here and just read all the slides and point, and we wanted the engagement from the audience. I mean, it's helped make our job a lot easier. So we want to say thank you for the interaction. And if there are no more questions, Vince, if you want to.
Yeah,
Thank you, Jared. Thank you, Mike.
Thank you.